So I think the two biggest misconceptions baked into American thinking about Russia are not per se unique to Russia. They're about the way that Americans think about the world, the way we think about history, the way we think about human nature. But let me lay them out. The first one is that we can win, that there's a scenario in which we defeat Russia, that Russia loses, and we win, and this conflict somehow ends and we graduate to a new phase. We're not going to defeat Russia. At best, we will find a way to live with Russia more safely, more securely, and in more prosperity than we are doing now. But Russia is going to be there, because any defeat of Russia is by definition also going to be a defeat of the United States. That's the nature of these kinds of high-stakes international relationships. It's not like swatting a fly. The fly goes away, no more fly. The other misconception is that we'll sort of bring Russia around to our way of seeing the world. So Russia will cease to be Russia and will be somehow more of a reflection of America, either through democracy promotion in Russia or through some sort of more skillful diplomacy. But it's another fundamentally ahistorical way of thinking about the world when we tell the Russians they're on the wrong side of history, they're going to lose and we're going to win, and/or they ought to come around and join our side and be more like us. None of those things work. We've sort of given up on decency in a great many contexts of our national life. And what I mean by decency, I don't necessarily buy what some of the Russians will say, that, you know, this is neo-McCarthyism, but there is a famous moment from the Army McCarthy hearings, which is when the Army, I think, General Counsel says something like, have you no decency, sir, right? It used to be something that not only everybody understood what that meant, but that was just baked into the way that we thought, the way that we behaved. Boundaries are being broken left and right every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, and we don't know where it leaves us. What we do know when it comes to something like the U.S.-Russia relationship is that it cannot be the case, it simply cannot be true, that a relationship which objectively we have both sides failed to invest in over 25 years, to the degree that it's obvious, right? We have almost no interaction, we have almost no economic connectivity. Literally the only area in which we have sort of a tenuous connection to one another is space and nuclear, right? And even that's not very big. We're barely holding on by our fingernails in both those areas. So it cannot be the case that with so little thickness between us in this relationship, that somehow it is that relationship which is responsible for all of these bad things going on around us. It's logically not possible. That is not an attempt to excuse the Russians, say they didn't do the things that the intelligence community says they did. Let's agree that they did those things. But the echoing, the sort of snowballing negative effects of all of these things that they have allegedly done is about us and not about them even a little bit. Since I did go to law school and they taught us to think in metaphors, let me try one. Maybe it's a little bit like you are in your own car behind the wheel. Let's stipulate it as a non-automatic driving car. You're actually driving it yourself, and you are careening recklessly down the highway in ways that you know are really dangerous. You're maybe scraping against the barricades on both sides, and you're just going way over the speed limit, and you kind of don't know what you're doing, right? It's a good, solid, high-quality car, so it's still moving forward, and you still have an abiding faith that it's going to get you where you're going, but just maybe a little less faith than you used to have. And at some moment in that crazy careening drive of yours, another car comes in and T-bones you, and you fly off the road. In law school, the question would be proximate cause, fault, and liability, right? In politics, you don't even ask that question. In politics, everything's about the guy who hit you, right? Because it's easy. It's rewarding. You don't have to look at your own behavior at all. And if you look at your own behavior, you start to ask all kinds of difficult, uncomfortable questions. Why were we vulnerable to this sort of terrible act in the first place? The answer is because we were doing all sorts of terrible, stupid things to make ourselves vulnerable, right? We are in that kind of situation. And the reaction to that situation, if you survive it, and right now we seem to be sort of limping through, but I would by no means say that we're out of the woods, right? I think the patient is in critical condition. But by patient, I mean literally our democracy, right? Our national constitutional order, our national political life is like kind of limping along as a result of this trauma, the proximate cause of which was a heck of a lot more complicated than just the Russians.